Greetings, dear chess fans and experts. This is FIDE Master Max Omariev with you. Today, we're going to talk about the so-called dirty chess tricks or chess traps. What variations do we call dirty chess tricks? These are usually openings that don't occur that often, which the leading theorists all over the chess world probably recognize as wrong. But the main point of using these openings is that the opponent may simply not know how to react to this or that move. As an example, I'll show you, first of all, the game of the famous American chess player, one of the pioneers of modern chess, Paul Morphy. He played approximately in the middle of the 19th century. One of his games went like this. Morphy played white. His opponent chose the Owen defense. It actually has different names. Some even call it the impossible beginning, but I'm gonna stick with the first one. Bishop b7, bishop d3, the most natural move. And here, Morphy's opponent made a very risky, but seemingly tactically justified move f5. What's its meaning? Everything is quite prosaic. If white takes ef, then black hits g2, after which the h1 rook gets trapped and it seems to be impossible to defend and save it. If white won't play ef, then black seems to be in an advantage. Well, for example, after knight c3, you can try to play knight f6 to press, and then it seems that this weakening of diagonal h5 e8 is not so much felt, right? Nevertheless, such moves should not go unpunished. We understand that. However, we want to beat ef, and so does Morphy. Bishop beats g2, queen h5, g6, fg. Well, in this position, Morphy's opponent made the move knight f6, after which, as I'm sure you've already guessed, he lost two moves: gh check, knight h5, and bishop g6. This game was recognized as probably one of the most beautiful games in chess. No, white managed, in fact, to sacrifice a rook, sacrifice a queen, and deliver checkmate with only flank. Undoubtedly, it's very beautiful, and all this was put into 8 moves. This variation was neglected for a long time, which is not surprising. Until it occurred to someone, I'm flipping the board intentionally here, that it's possible to make a way for black, bishop g7, and suddenly everything is not so bad. White, of course, beats gh, king f8. Now I have a question for you, dear viewers. How would you play for white here? I think people who don't know this variation would probably, at blitz tempo, make a g8 check move. Naturally, you want to capture the knight with check and the pawn promotion, even if it's only for one move, right? Since we're giving up the rook, there'll be something to suffer for. In any case, it's just an exchange, not a rook. So this logic, which is quite justified, I think, and quite logical, turns out to be wrong in this situation, because suddenly, after the king hits g8, for example, queen g4, bishop hits h1, it turns out the black has a fair game. And something like bishop c4, e6 are absolutely no threat to black. Although the king on g8 seems to not be covered, in fact, it's quite reliable with the bishop on g7, the rook is nearby and ready to come to his aid, the queen is ready to go somewhere on f6, and so on. So assessment of this position is unfavorable for white, despite the fact that it seems they did everything logically and tried to punish the opponent for such treachery in the opening. As f5 on the third move. Firstly, the rule of fighting for the center in the opening was violated. White began to occupy the center, black instead made the move b6, bishop b7. Secondly, the move f5 does not inspire confidence, but nevertheless, as you can see, you can meet the move hg even in games of serious chess players at the master level, after which black gets advantage and may win. But there are no miracles. Everything is logical, so we flip the board and return to this position, but this time we play for white. Critical position of variance, in which we can see the following. White has a rook hanging, black has a knight hanging, but as it turns out, it's not necessary for white to capture it right away. White has a very strong move of knight f3, which leads to a big advantage. So far, you probably haven't figured out what I mean yet. Let's start simple. Obviously, we won't be considering the moves bishop hits f3, queen hits f3, and then capturing the rook on a8. Let's see what happens if black just takes h1. That makes sense. White has a very strong move, knight e5, and it turns out that black is in trouble. The queen f7 mate threatens, the queen e8 loses immediately, at least because of the knight g6, after which there are terrible windmill attacks, and in general, it's clear without analysis. And the bishop beats e5 also does not allow black to resist after de. It turns out that white has the most terrible threat there, the queen e8. One of the games played on the internet went like this. Bishop h6, knight h6, queen h6, king f7. Well, I'm not mentioning here that bishop g6 also wins for the queen, but bishop c4 wins even faster, and now it turns out that e6 loses because of the queen f6. Checkmate. If we play d5 as it was done in this game, then white is not bothering anything. Here we get beautiful mate e6. This is a winning option for white. If black doesn't hit h1 here, they have only to play knight f6, which is the most logical option. Because it looks like we get the queen, we take the end of this knight out from under the pawn strike, asking white the question, so what's next? The queen hangs, the rook hangs, and if the queen's off, the knight hangs. Well, the queen goes exactly where it needs to go. It moves to g6. Well, now black has a choice, but the choice, unfortunately, is not very pleasant. The bishop hangs on g2, that's why we won't be considering something like rook h7. We'll consider the example. Bishop hits f3, but after the white wins by rook g1. The bishop hangs on g7, and the rook hits h7 is the only way here. And here is such a computer move queen g3, after which it turns out that white wins material and remains with extra material themselves. At least an extra pawn. Well, for example, bishop e4. The most natural answer is bishop e4, knight e4, and such a small check, queen f3, knight f6 loses because of queen a8. White is up the exchange. Well, in the king g8, after the queen hits e4, as we say, the position can be traced. Black has an unsecured king. White has an extra pawn and a huge chance to attack. You can check all this by using a chess engine. The chess engine will fully confirm my words. The evaluations for black here are not good. The bishop beats f3, so it's likely to lose right away. As for the move, bishop beats h1. That doesn't save either after bishop h6 again, bishop beats h6, queen h6. Well, there's probably no point in checking. Rook h7 is the only one, but after knight g5, again, you can ask the engine and it will tell you the position is lost, but you can see it with the naked eye. For example, queen e8 loses and knight beats rook h7, queen g7. So, what do we get here? What have we learned from this? Summary of this lesson: as an exception, you can go for the Owen defense playing for black, once with an inexperienced opponent. b6, d4, bishop b7. Yes, you can use it in a blitz game when you know for sure, though it's hard to know for sure that the opponent won't be able to react correctly, that they'll beat g8, after which we really get the advantage. But if you play with a person with rank higher than Candidate Master, you know that they play very well, that they calculate options well, and that they know their theory really good. Then do not count on the fact that they will not make a move knight a3. Unfortunately, after knight f3, this position is, to put in medical terms, incurable for black. It's very sad, because white is likely to win here, and do that quickly enough. I, for example, do not see any appropriate response for black. In other words, this dirty trick, as we can see, does not work when white plays correctly. But again, you shouldn't use it more than once. By the way, at the end, I want to tell you that we can see something similar in a slightly different edition. So if black starts this way, white wants to put 3 pawns in the center, which is a natural desire. After bishop b7, bishop b3. Here already the move f5 is more justified. Here we can say it's like a separate theoretical direction. If the pawn on e7 f5 is rather such a trap idea, which serious chess players will disprove, then this is quite a decent move, but nevertheless, white still captures with the pawn. Here black can capture g2, but in addition to the move g2, they also have the move bishop b4 check. Here we have to play the king f1 in order to defend g2, because black has a retreat on f8. Knight f6. Well, in here the theory says a lot. This is a gambit variant. I, for example, believe that the strongest option is the move c5. After bc follows a3 and the unexpected bishop, the bishop has a problem. But that's not important. I want to show that after the bishop beats g2, queen h5, check. g6, fg, still knight f6 loses, but not because of gh, but because of g7. g7, knight h5, gh, and it turns out that black ends up with nothing. So here it is also necessary to make the move bishop g7, gh, king f8. In this position, the game is a little bit different. Bishop g5, knight f6, queen f4. Here white will rely on this scary pin. The theory advises knight c6, knight d2. I think this position was in the Megremov versus Yusupov game, which Yusupov won. But it was proved that this position is quite sad for black and white should win. Despite the fact that white has no rook, the black king's position is very bad and white's pin is very strong. And threats, knight f4, knight e4, queenside castling, and so on. So white can even play without a rook. Well, that's about all these ideas for b6. I want to conclude my lesson for today. Once again, I repeat that you can try this trap once, but know that if you play with an experienced opponent, blame yourself and not me. I do not advise you to do this. Thank you for your attention, dear friends. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button to keep informed about the videos we post every week. Also, subscribe to our Telegram channel and Instagram, and I'll see you soon.